All right, so here we are, last day of our eye drawing. Today we're going to work through steps 25 through 30. So the last time we were together, we worked on the lower eyelid. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to work this upper eyelid. And basically you're going to use the same exact method of darkening along that line, right, until it begins to come around the corner there, and then blending it. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to start right on that line. Remember, very, very lightly, gradually building up that dark value. And then once you have a nice dark value, begin to work your way about halfway, getting as light as you can when you get to halfway. And again, work your way back up to make that top edge just a little bit darker. And you're going to go ahead and you're just going to continue that all the way around the side. Take your time. There's no rush. Remember, it's easy to make it a little bit darker. It's really difficult to make it lighter. Focus right on that top edge. The darker I can get that top edge, the lighter this is going to appear. So it's sort of like a little trick that you can use. Darken your shadows if your highlights don't feel like they're very light. And again, after I begin to establish that dark line, I'm going to gradually work my way about halfway, not the entire way across that upper eyelid, because we want to give the effect that it's popping forward, but that there's some skin right here. So we don't want to make it an entire shadow. And I'm going to pay attention to that shape that I found, that beak-like shape over here, because that's what the eye really looks like. And then I can gradually build up when I establish my dark area and work my way towards the center, getting lighter, and then stopping about halfway. You see, it's going to take a little while, especially if you're working on an eye that's a lot larger than this. And I'm going to find that top edge, and like I said, just darken it as much as I can to make those highlights appear a little bit lighter. Once you've laid down all of that graphite, go ahead and take out your blender, give it a couple of folds. Again, everybody can just use their finger for this and blend that area. Nice even blend. And you're going to notice that you're going to begin to create that three-dimensional eyelid. And you can pull that gray tone almost right to the edge of that eyelid, because that's going to have some of that value of the skin. So it's going to be lighter than the white of the eye, and it's darker than the white of the eye, and it's going to be darker than those highlights. So you can kind of really get in there and let that gray fall right to that edge. And again, remember to use that same spot on your blender unless it rips open, in which case you have to find a new spot. But try to collect all that graphite so that we can do a little bit of drawing with it in a second. All right, and then I've collected some of that beautiful graphite. But at this point, I've completed step number 25, and I've darkened and blended that upper eyelid. Then for step number 26, I want to go ahead and I want to use some of that graphite on my blender to create a nice soft blend. And the soft blend is going to go right below this line, leaving a nice highlight right along that edge there. So now I'm going to go ahead and begin to put some of this extra graphite down here. Trying to stay away from that little edge. That's going to be important. I can always go back and grab some more from the upper eyelid, grab some more from anywhere that I have a nice shadow. But I want to be able to see my blend down here. So you may need to do a little bit of work to make that visible. I can always go to an area where I have some shadow, where it's looking a little bit light, and I can darken that area. You could use your pupil like we had been doing. This area along the bottom of the eyelid is looking a little bit light right now, though, so I can apply a little bit extra there. And this is probably a good time for you to add a little bit extra. And then I'll go back to my blender. I'm going to grab some of that extra by blending it out. And again, this is only helping the drawing, upping the contrast. Then when I get enough on there, there we go. Now we can really begin to see it down there. So that's important, because we're going to be able to do some drawing in this area below. And there we go. And once you have created a soft blend down there, and that might take a little bit of work, you have completed step number 26. Now, for step number 27, we have to do a little bit of practice first. So you're just going to take your paper and go ahead and flip it right over to the back side. And we need to practice making a tapered line. So with your pencil, you're going to hold it onto the paper with a little bit of pressure, and then you're going to flick your pencil away. And what's going to happen to this line is, let me get it really focused so you can see it. You're going to create a line that is thicker at one end. We can't see it. There we go. Now we can see it. That's definitely thicker at this end and then gradually gets thinner until it almost disappears. So go ahead and practice this maybe 5 or 6 times, having a little bit of pressure. So if I try to press it, it's hard. I'm actually putting some pressure on the page for the first time, and then I'm gently pulling away with this quick motion. But I also have to be able to control it. So practice that a couple times until you see that all the lines that you're making are starting out thicker on the end where you're beginning to draw, and then gradually tapering thinner, because this is the type of marking that we're going to make for our eyelashes. So once you've practiced a little bit, you can go ahead back to your drawing, and now we're going to put in the lower eyelashes first. And that's why it was really important to leave this highlight right here, because that's where your lower eyelashes grow out of, this little ridge right here on your bottom eyelid. And these are pretty spaced out, so you can actually practice a little bit. You're going to start at one end. You're going to go ahead and give it these little eyelashes. And they're just going to end right past that line that we drew for the edge. And the weird thing about your lower eyelashes is that they kind of go all directions. So every once in a while, if they crisscross or come down to the side, that's totally fine. And they're pretty spaced out. But again, we don't want to make a pattern because that's not going to look natural. But it's okay to have them crisscrossing. And then right as you get to the edge of the iris here next to the tear duct, that's where you're going to kind of stop them. And you can see they got a lot shorter over there. Maybe I'll add 1 or 2 more in there. But keep them really spaced out. So it's a nice practice. You can see they really appear to be those lower eyelashes. Once you've practiced and got your lower eyelashes established, now you're ready for the upper eyelashes. And they're all going to start right here, right below that highlight. So they're coming out of this shadow right here. And these are quite a bit longer. They're going to kind of curve this way. And as I get to the top, they're going to come straight up. Then they're going to begin to curve this way. So they're a little bit challenging to draw. And these are going to be a little bit longer. So you can let those strokes be a little bit longer. And again, they're going to crisscross too. They're not going to be perfect. So you can see I pulled one in that kind of crisscrossed backwards. I don't want to let them get too long now. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to curve them a little bit. And again, when they get nice and spaced out evenly, I'm going to go back and I'm going to put in a couple that kind of mix it up. And that's what gives it that natural appearance. And again, don't forget, you guys can rotate your paper a little bit. That's always super helpful. You can see I just kind of go with the flow, and then I go back to add in those extras. And the bad thing about the eyelashes is once you put them down, that's it. You can't erase once you get those eyelashes down. So don't overdo it. Work slowly. Keep them nice and spaced out. And again, as you come to the top, they're going to come kind of straight up from the eye. So I have them nice and spaced out. I'm going to go back through, and hopefully you have a little bit more room at the top of your page. Then I'm going to fill in some random ones. I'm going to let them get close to one another. I'm going to let them crisscross a little bit. But I want to be able to see that space between. Now, once you get to the middle where that pupil is, they should be going straight up. And then you're going to give them a slight curve out over here to the right-hand side. So kind of follow that curve of the eye. And again, they're starting in the shadow. The pencil starts in the shadow, and then it loops out and around. And once I have some of them spaced out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back and add in those other ones that aren't exactly where we want them to be. And I'm going to work in those upper eyelashes until I get over here to the tear duct. And now we have completed step number 28, upper and lower eyelashes. Now, for step number 29, we just want to do a little bit of touch-up work. So before we needed some graphite, we were looking for areas that we needed to darken. One of them that I mentioned is the pupil, because a lot of you, if you're looking at your drawing right now, have probably noticed that this is no longer your darkest value. And that's really important because you know this is a hole in the middle and it is black. A lot of you said it looks like space. So I want to remember them always coloring in that same direction. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a few layers on this pupil. And I'm not going to go past that line because we already did a little bit of work here in the highlight. So I'm just going to color going all one direction. Again, staying totally away from those highlights, giving it a nice coating of graphite, and then going to my blender and ever so carefully giving it some blends. And if I need to go in again and darken again, I absolutely can. I just need to rotate my paper and make sure that I'm coloring in another direction. And you're probably going to get to a point where you kind of can't darken it anymore. It's just kind of staying the same value. And that's your sign that the pupil is finished. And you can continue adding layers until you get to that point, or you can just make sure that it's the darkest value on your drawing, and then you can stop there. So you can see here, this nice dark edge here. Beautiful. And then one last time, anytime I add a layer, to keep it from looking like it's a drawing, I'm going to make sure that I blend that layer. There we go. And I forgot a step, guys. So we just did step number 29, but I forgot step number 27. So we can actually go back and do that right now, especially after we've practiced those eyelashes. So step number 27 was actually to do some of these eyelash reflections in the highlight here. Because remember, this light is coming down from the top. That's why we have this shadow. So that means these eyelashes are creating a little bit of shadow out here where the eye is popped out. So we're really good at this point. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go to this highlight. Starting right at the edge of the highlight, we're just going to pull a couple of those tapered lines. Just a couple so that they're noticeable. But now we have that nice reflection of the eyelashes. Maybe it was better we do it in this order anyway. It seems to make a lot more sense. All right, so step number 29 was to darken that pupil until you get it the darkest value in your drawing. Don't forget to blend, and don't forget to always color the same direction, and then the same direction with the next layer. Then we backed up, we went to step number 27, which was to make sure we have those eyelash reflections, which as you can see, it doesn't matter really when you do those, as long as you have your pupil done first. Now that we have step number 29 done and step number 27, we're ready for our final step. And after we've found those extra shadows we need to add, just like we did before we finished up our iris here, we're going to find some of those highlights that we need to add. And yesterday we were working on the tear duct, establishing some highlight guides, and working on this outer edge, again, establishing some highlight guides. So we want to go ahead and we want to use our eraser, because that's our highlight drawing tool. And we're going to work on the highlights over here in the tear duct. So remember, if we looked right next to the edge, we sort of had this little triangular highlight. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there. And then we also had a highlight right here by the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work in a little bit of a highlight right on this edge. Now, to soften these highlights, because it's at the end of the drawing, you can actually just use your pencil because you don't want to get too much graphite in there. Or your finger, I apologize. You don't want too much graphite. Just kind of blend those edges away a little bit just so they're a smidge softer. Once you've completed working up some of those highlights in the tear duct, now we want to work up that heart-shaped highlight over here. So go ahead, right where you have that little triangle started, and erase that little heart-shaped highlight right in there. And then again, you're just going to take your finger for this one because you don't want to get rid of all this extra graphite. That's just going to take those highlights right away. And you're just going to blend it a little bit with your finger. And that's just going to take away some of those edges, but you're still going to see that nice highlight. I think I need a little bit more over there. There we go. The last effect is one of my favorites. It's creating the effect of pores, the skin pores that are happening right here. And it kind of finishes out where you left off with your lower eyelashes. And again, it's a highlight, so we're going to be drawing it using our eraser. So you're going to take your eraser, and you're going to do the stippling motion, which is like tapping at your paper. And you're going to see it's going to pull up some of that soft blend that we have there. And it's going to create this really unique effect, and that effect is going to mimic the pores of your skin. So go ahead and add some of that stippling effect in there. You can take it right up next to the edge, but you still want to be able to see that shadow. So you can still see that little shadow. I want to do it a little bit more because it's fun. I can go right along that bottom edge to really sort of break it up there. And if you have a little bit of room over here, you can throw some of them in over here. They're not going to be over here in the creases, though. But you can put a few in over here. And then, at that point, you have finished your hyper-realistic eye. So congratulations. I know there might be a little bit of sadness in there, but it's only because you've worked so hard, and I am so proud of what you've done. So that is it. Step number 30. We added some highlights in the tear duct. We worked on our little highlight here over in the corner of the eye. We added a couple of pores using that stippling texture, and now we are done.